Once upon a time, in a quiet countryside village surrounded by endless green fields, narrow cobbled streets, and ancient oak trees, whose branches seemed to whisper forgotten tales of the past, there lived a boy named William, who grew up with dreams much larger than the tiny stone cottage he shared with his parents, his grandmother and his younger sister, Amelia. And though life in the village was peaceful, it was also limited, for every villager seemed to follow the same predictable pattern: born in the village, educated in the small local school, working in the same farmland or weaving workshop, marrying someone from the same community, and eventually fading into the same circle of life. But William, even as a child, gazed beyond the rolling hills and imagined cities where tall buildings touched the sky, where carriages and motor cars filled the streets, and where the world was filled with endless knowledge, culture and opportunity. His father, Thomas, a hard-working farmer whose hands were rough with calluses from years of ploughing, would often say, "Dreaming is fine, Will, but do not forget that soil feeds you and the land gives you life." Yet William would smile politely, knowing that his heart was restless, yearning for more than the boundaries of their modest life. And Amelia, who adored her elder brother more than anyone, would whisper at night when the candlelight flickered against the old cottage walls, "One day you will go and I shall miss you, but I know you are meant to see more of the world." And William would promise her that no matter where he went he would always write letters, long letters filled with stories that would bring distant places alive for her. And so the boy who once wandered through fields chasing butterflies began to chase something far less tangible but far more powerful, an unshakable belief in a destiny beyond what anyone could see. As William grew older, the pressure to follow in his father's footsteps became heavier, and though his hands grew stronger from carrying sacks of grain and tending to the cattle, his mind grew hungrier, for he would spend hours after his labor sitting by the village library, a small room attached to the church, reading every book he could find, from Shakespeare's plays to Newton's discoveries. And sometimes he would climb to the top of the hill with a notebook and scribble his own thoughts, writing stories and reflections about what it meant to be alive, to suffer, to hope, to rise and to fall. And though his mother, Margaret, would quietly worry that her son's ideas might lead him away, she also saw the fire in his eyes and knew that no cage could hold him forever. When he turned 16, an opportunity arrived in the form of a travelling scholar who visited the village to lecture about the advancements of science and literature in the nearby city of London. And William listened with such intensity that the scholar noticed him, and after the talk asked his name. And when William explained his fascination with learning, the scholar said, "Young man, if you are willing to work hard, the city will welcome you with more knowledge than these fields could ever give." And those words became etched into William's soul like scripture, giving him courage to speak with his parents that very night. His father resisted, fearing that the city would swallow his son whole, but eventually, with his mother's gentle persuasion and Amelia's tearful encouragement, William set out with nothing more than a small bag, a notebook, and coins his grandmother pressed into his palm, whispering, "May fortune be kinder to you than it ever was to us." The journey to London was overwhelming, for the boy who had never travelled beyond neighbouring villages suddenly found himself surrounded by smoke from factories, the cries of vendors, the rattle of carriages, and the sheer immensity of a world that moved faster than he could comprehend. Yet he did not let fear weaken his resolve. He found work sweeping floors in a small bookshop, and though his clothes were simple and his meals modest, he considered himself fortunate, for each evening after closing he was allowed to read any book he desired. And there, surrounded by dusty shelves, he consumed the works of Dickens, Darwin, and philosophers whose names he had never heard before. And as weeks turned into months, his hunger for knowledge turned into ambition, pushing him to attend public lectures, to ask questions, to write essays that he sent to local newspapers. And slowly but surely his name began to appear in print, small at first, but to him it was proof that the boy from the fields was now a voice in the vast city. Yet success was never without struggle. There were nights when William slept hungry, nights when he doubted himself, and moments when letters from home filled him with longing, reminding him of Amelia, waiting eagerly for stories that he sometimes felt too weary to write. But whenever despair threatened to consume him, he remembered the scholar's words, his grandmother's blessing, and his own silent vow to break free of the cycle that bound his village. Years passed, and William's essays gained recognition for their clarity and depth. eventually earning him a place at a university, where he studied literature and philosophy with fervor, though he never forgot his humble beginnings. For while others studied out of privilege, he studied out of survival, determination, and gratitude for every opportunity. Professors admired him, peers respected him, and slowly he built not just a career but also a sense of purpose, for he realized that knowledge was not meant to remain locked in books or lecture halls, but to inspire, uplift and liberate those trapped by ignorance or circumstance. After graduating, William became a writer and lecturer, traveling across towns and villages, giving speeches that encouraged the youth to dream beyond the visible horizon, to question, to learn, to rise. And in every face he saw a reflection of the boy he once was, hungry, restless yet hopeful. And though he achieved recognition, awards and wealth, what mattered most to him was the day he returned to his village after many years. The same fields stretched wide, the same oak trees stood tall, but the boy who had once left was now a man who carried the world in his words. And when he embraced his aging parents and his now-grown sister Amelia, tears blurred his vision, for he realized that no matter how far he had gone, the roots of his strength were here, in the soil, the love, the sacrifices that had given him wings. Standing on the very hill where he had once scribbled his childish notes, William addressed the villagers, sharing his journey not as a boast, but as a testament that even the smallest seed could grow into a mighty tree if nurtured with faith, courage and perseverance. And as the sun set casting golden light across the fields, he smiled knowing that he had fulfilled not only his dream, but also his promise, to live a life that proved no boundary was final, no struggle was wasted, and no heart that dared to hope was ever truly alone. And so his story lived on, not just in books and lectures, but in the countless lives he touched, reminding generations to come that the world is vast, but so too is the human spirit, limitless in its capacity to rise from the humblest of beginnings and carve a destiny brighter than anyone could imagine.